I'm sorry to stop that. That's Sublime Indifference by Peter Bernstein on the album Earth Tones. So today we're going to be talking about Peter Bernstein. Peter's been on the scene for about 33 years, give or take. Probably going to have to ask Jeff about that just to see if all the factual evidence is good. Um, but he plays often with Larry Goldings and Bill Stewart. Um, he talks a lot about his adventures as a sideman, of which he's played with Sonny Rawlings, Joshua Redmond, Diana Krall, many others. And he has 10 records to his name. And he teaches at NYU as well as the New School. So Peter Bernstein, as he started out in the music world, he started with piano actually, and then he switched to the guitar when he was age 12. And the reason he did this switch is because he saw kids playing the guitar in school. You know, it was all the rage back then, as it is now and always. And also his art teacher, art class, actually played guitar in art class to the students. And she sold him and a guitar and taught him a little bit about, you know, basic chords and stuff in sixth grade. And in terms of music that he was checking out, musical inspiration and stuff, his parents, he says, were listening a lot to the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, and, you know, barely any jazz or classical influences. So he was listening to a little bit. And with friends, he listened to a lot of Earth, Wind, and Fire, Steely Dan and Jimi Hendrix, all that kind of stuff. And he says that, you know, rock was everyone's intro to the guitar at the time, you know, and I would have to agree that it was also my intro, as well as probably most of the people here and everywhere. So yeah. And he finally did start getting into jazz by being open about other types of music, and actually reading, which I thought was kind of surprising. But in doing so, he discovered people like Django Reinhardt, Charlie Christian, Wes Montgomery, and other pretty awesome people like Pat Metheny, who was deeply in the scene at the time. And Pete talks about how Pat Metheny and other people that he was listening to at the time talked about the people that they listened to. So Peter would take this stuff and he would listen to the people that his idols were talking about, thus expanding his whole entire musical deal. And there's this quote I have from him that I like, saying, "Once I got into the world of jazz, it extended way beyond the guitar. You know, it wasn't just about the instrument. You know, he started listening to sax players, piano players, big band singers, started getting influences from all over, you know, and I think that's something that everyone can do and everyone does, to become a better musician. Um, when it came time for college education, he moved around a lot of different programs. So he started out at Rutgers University in New Jersey for his freshman year, in which he was able to study with Kenny Barron a little bit because he was there teaching at the time. And then a guy named Ted Dunbar, who was the guitar teacher there. And Pete describes this freshman year at Rutgers as being his exposure year, as it were. So it was, I don't know, he was getting all these different influences flying at him from all over, which, you know, I could say was similar to my first year here at ASU, even just, you know, getting real into the music because it's finally part of your, you know, real professional life and all that stuff. So he talked about that, and he said it was really hard to narrow down what he needed to narrow down, especially with a teacher like Ted Dunbar, because Ted was really focused on like the specifics, you know, like he was talking books a lot, like very specific things about chords, exercises, all that kind of stuff, which is great. But Pete didn't really find a great use for it at the time. And he complained that there were not a lot of places to play there. So instead, he went the next year to William Patterson, where on Fridays he would go hang out with his buddy Larry Goldings in New York, and attend jam sessions, do gigs and stuff like that. And at the time, Larry was going to the New School, so there was a lot of influence coming from there. After his year at William Patterson, he spent 9 months in Paris because his family had moved there for work reasons. And he decided he would go check it out. And he spent his time there shedding, going to jam sessions. And he said there were not a lot of gigs happening for him, but he used the time to check out the scene a lot. And while he was there, he says he got a lot of calls, letters, and stuff from Larry back in New York, who was starting to go up, and play lots and stuff. And then Pete felt like he was missing out. And he really felt like he was missing out when he heard that Jim Hall had started teaching at the New School. So he had to go back and check that out for sure. When he did go back, he talks about there being lots of good places to play in New York, like this place called Bradley's that had nightly gigs. Not necessarily for him, but stuff was happening all the time. Village Vanguard, Village Gate, and the Bottom Line, which is a place that Sonny Rollins was playing a lot, and all the youngins, as it were, could go see him. Not for like super expensive a price, it sounds. And this next segment of the presentation, I'm kind of going to talk about Pete's philosophies a little bit, so we can kind of get into taking some stuff out of this, as it were. And I want to talk first about how he feels about teaching, because I thought that was interesting. He talks about it. He says, financially, as a musician, it's a necessity to be able to teach, but he also likes passing things down to the next generation. And I got a quote here from him that says, "It's important to teach unless you just can't or are too busy. Everyone, and also financially." So there's that. And he talks a little bit about his teachers again. There was Ted Dunbar, that we talked about earlier, who was really organized, like the books and stuff and all that. And then he also had Jim Hall at the New School, who was kind of the other end of the spectrum. The word that Peter used to describe him was intuitive. He really liked learning from his students and figuring out what they were working on and stuff. And he would say things like, "Hey, can you show me what you did there? And let's work this stuff out together," and all that stuff. "What are you guys checking out?" So I thought that was cool. And then Pete goes on to talk about taking the things from his teachers, and how to do that. He says, you got to take all the things that you get from different people and try to incorporate them in your own way. Like learn how to take an idea and expand upon it and make it your own and that kind of thing. And I'll get into that a little later here too. He kind of expands on that. And in terms of just playing, this is one that we all hear a lot. He talks about telling a story, and the words he used were narrative flow. There's supposed to be a reason for the notes that we play, which is it's good to hear. Like it's obvious, but it's good to hear. Like every once in a while, I think about that stuff and get it refreshed in the brain. And he talks about standards too, and how he learns those. He talks about lyrics, how those are really helpful, but not like the whole picture, which I think some of us get a little bit bogged down in the poetic stuff of it, which is all really cool. But Pete talks about how the notes of the melody are the most important. And what I really like, what he said was that singing is like a certain dimension of the song. It's like an important piece, but not the whole. But it's really helpful to have that piece to see where else the song goes in your mind if you didn't have that when you were learning it anyways, you know. And this next little section I'm kind of surprised to hear about. He talked about actually having a fear of playing solo. Um, you know, because it's not really a conversation as he talks about it, and there's not people to inspire him back if he puts something out there. Um, so yeah, he definitely likes playing with people more. But I just thought it was surprising because I've heard him and he, or not live or anything, play solo, but on recordings and stuff, he's pretty fluent and does a good job. So I'll play a little bit here to see what you guys think too. All right, so that was Darn That Dream. And if you guys are looking for this recording, it's Peter Bernstein with the Tilden Webb Trio. Just in case you wanted to check that out, which you should because it's super awesome. Um, and I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you have heard it, but yeah, just a good thing to share. So the next thing I think is the most important thing to take away from Peter Bernstein. Um, and it's another kind of obvious thing, but the way he talks about it is nice to hear. So yeah, he thinks about himself on the guitar as an orchestrator, which we all should, you know. Um, he says you have to play the melody and the comping role, and there's lots of space to figure lots of different things out. You know, especially if you're listening and you're trying to communicate with people. And I don't know, you can really hear it in his playing in a unique and eloquent way if you're listening for it. And I'll throw some recordings up later that I think show that kind of thing happening pretty well. Um, and I think this leads into the next point, which is him talking about being a sideman, because you know orchestration. That's kind of where the learning of orchestration happens the most. Um, so as a sideman, he talks about you have to serve the music as best you can, um, and execute the leader's vision as well as you can. You know, as close as you can get it to what they want it. But also, and this is the thing that I feel like a lot of us, me especially, don't think about too much. You have to add your own creative personality to the music still, because you know you get picked as a sideman for certain reasons, and you want to be able to put that out there. As he said, you're not there to play the guitar facelessly. You're there to impact the music with whatever you can bring to it. You know, and I think that was just really cool to hear. Um, as a sideman, I mentioned some of the acts he played with earlier, but he played with Lou Donaldson early on. Lou Donaldson, alto sax player, and also in that same band with Lonnie Smith, uh, which is really what he said got him into organ groups and the organ group sound, um, which I'll touch on later. He also played with George Coleman, Bobby Hutcherson, Harold Mayburn, Jimmy Cobb, and again Sonny Rollins. I know I said that earlier, but it's worth mentioning twice. I think that's pretty cool. And what he takes from these guys is that they are really comfortable with their decisions in the music, exhibit like a great amount of strength and conviction due to their years of experience, lots of courage to play what they can. And he talks about how they remove themselves from the restraints of the instrument, which takes years and years and years and years of experience. But that was a cool thing to hear and strive for. And I wanted to play this Jordu with Melvin Ryan as part of his experience as a sideman, just a little bit, because just in case we're running out of time. Had to skip it a little bit so we could get some of that comping in there, because we were talking about orchestration, and also his comping is just fantastic. I love it, and I feel like it's, if you're looking to transcribe some stuff, Pete's comping is just phenomenal. So yeah, let's see where we are here. I think that pretty well leads into our next topic of Peter Bernstein, which is his experience with the jazz trio. He likes the arrangement of the jazz trio because there's a lot of room to have like a versatile job to do. He takes melody and soloing sections still, but then he also comps for the organ player while they lay down the bass lines and the solos, which I don't know. I think this is a really good thing to think about if we're trying to apply this orchestration concept, and while we're learning about this stuff. I think one of the best places to learn to be a good orchestrator is in an organ trio, just because the timbre of the organ and everything that's going on, like you can both comp sometimes and have things happen like that where it doesn't muddy it up as much as it would with a piano, and you can still learn some seriously cool things about it, and there's lots of jobs for us to do in there while we're learning about what it takes to orchestrate, in an improvising setting. So yeah. Next topic is Monk. The first music that Pete describes remembering loving is actually ragtime, which is why he started with piano. And then a long time after the piano, when he was on guitar, he was studying Monk and realized he had a lot of that going on, a lot of that ragtime sound. And this was always music that he was studying. He was always spending time with Monk, listening to his tunes, discovering similarities and differences, in different arrangements of the same songs between Monk's different groups. And he talks about admiring Monk's ability to not let criticism of his unique playing, shake him from playing uniquely, which he admired a lot. So as a result, he wanted to pursue a Monk album, which I'll play a tiny bit of because we're running out of time. wish we could play more of that, but we're running short. Sorry about that. So things that Pete talks about, things that he's working towards, is orchestrating the moment a lot with others, and also making the limitations of the guitar disappear. I was reading some things, and he talked about that passionately. It's not about the instrument and the limitations of the instrument. It's about the music, and that's the things he's working towards. And then the whole point, or things that I thought we should take away from this exploration into Peter Bernstein and what he's done in history is that he's all about versatility on the instrument. I feel like a lot of the guitar greats that have come before him are known for doing like one thing really well. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but that's just kind of how it seems a little bit. And Peter is not that guy. His strategy is like that of a lot of what the educational world has brought forth, for what the notions of a sideman should be. How can I add to what's going on here, that sort of thing. But also being able to do this while still adding his own voice and influence to the role. And from what I've heard, he applies his orchestration idea to pretty much everything he plays, whether he's acting as a sideman or not. So I think what we can really take away from Peter Bernstein is that you should bring the level of concentration and conversation of a sideman to whatever role you're playing in the band, whether that's sideman or frontman or whatever. Especially as a guitar player, if we play melodies as a frontman, there's always room for us to add a little extra something, chord wise and all that. So yeah, and I'm gonna let it transition to my video of the transcription.